Okay, to keep things moving on time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining Identity Hygiene Live. This is our first of hopefully many of these sessions, and we have with us today Fredy Pardo. He's the field CISO at Sphere, and he's going to be sharing a session on how PKIs or just KPIs and identity access management and key performance indicators. I'm going to let Fredy go ahead and jump right in. He's going to introduce himself, give a little brief background on himself, and then jump into why key performance indicators and identity access management are more important than ever. Take it away, Fredy.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Fredy Pardo. I've been with the Sphere for over 2 years now. A little bit of my background, I came from IT digital transformations in 2 major financial institutions in the US, working for technical implementation, all the cybersecurity tools through DevSecOps, implementing security environments for a digital transformation, moving from on-prem services to cloud computing services. As part of the DevSecOps teams. More recently, when I joined Sphere, was customer success, working directly with the clients. And early this year, my title had changed and moved from customer success to field CISO practice, kind of leading the practice, make sure the standards and new ideas for the company and the product. Thank you so much for having us today, guys. So let's start it. So our session today is about, KPIs and why key performance indicators are very important in the terms of identity and access management, right? So I guess the very first concept that we manage is you can manage what you can measure, right? I think this is a very common saying, and this is why measure of activities around information security and identity and access management practice are really necessary because the perimeter is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the first thing is that we're going to see today is why in the last 10 years, many organizations has introduced a proper identity and access management programs. The reason for that is basically they need to find a way to security management, increasing quality of digital identities in their provisioning and deprovisioning processes, right? We're talking about people joining the organization, people joining new areas of the organization, new computing identities have been created, and now between the mix of cloud computing, on-prem computing, and many organizations moving from mainframe computing to mirroring services on cloud computer, that creates a sprawl of new permissions and new identities within all the organizations. So the measuring effectiveness of these controls are necessary for organization, usually to improve the security posture. And more important, all the organizations that require any kind of a standard or need to follow or be in compliance with any kind of a standard are required to get those KPIs online. KPIs can be primarily from the most simple KPIs to the most complex KPIs, and those more complex KPI can translate into KRIs as needed, right? So this is important because the full concept of the KPI is very simple. You measure, you report, and you improve. And that is a feedback that any single organization requires for that. So you set up your goals, you set up your plan, you implement it, you report on that implementation, and you improve. That means that the KPIs are not static. KPIs can be modified over time. And those modifications are based on the company needs or organization needs. If the goal change, if the company is acquired another organization, if the company is going into digital transformation, if the company is going into the obsolescence process. So this is very important to understand that KPIs are not static. You can measure, but you can actually modify and improve every time you want. Next part of this is choosing the right KPIs, right? When we're talking about KPIs, we're talking about what is it that I need to measure, right? Do I need to measure a simplistic way to understand, hey, how many provisioning accounts am I provisioning in a monthly basis, for instance? How many accounts I did provision in a monthly basis? Do I need to test how many of my accounts have ownership on it? So this is important to understand that the choosing of the KPIs has a high dependency on the organization that you're working for and their goals, right? If the goal is to serve external clients, you might want to have a set of KPIs. If your organization is highly regulated, you probably want to set a different kind of lines. If your organization is only servicing internal employees within any given organization, you also need to check what kind of KPIs you need for that, right? There is no fit for all, right? The goal differ organization to organization. And that's very, very critical, because when we're talking about KPIs, for example, in highly regulated kind of industries, we're talking about financial sector, we're talking about healthcare section, we're talking about government. This is where you want to start looking at, hey, what kind of KPIs do I need, right? And one of the main ideas the organizations wants to move towards is everything that is related to security compliance, right? Why? Because, access control, one is introduced, the problem of identity as a new perimeter becoming a compliance matter for any organization. So by putting some kind of KPIs or some kind of metrics about your security compliance, when we're talking about security compliance, we're talking about, how to reduce my risk in my organization, how to improve my processes, which is change management processes that are really relevant for this approach, how to enable business as part of my organization, right? This is what we're talking about, the goals of the organization, right? If you need to create a rapid provisioning, deprovisioning process to serve the different teams within the organization, business enablement is something that you need to consider to put the metrics on, because if you don't know what's happening, you're never going to know, what is it that you need to improve or not. And then more important, data quality, right? Data quality is one of the main goals for security compliance, right? You want to know, who has access to the data. You want to know how the people access to the data. You want to know what kind of data this people is accessing. Is MPI data in place? Is KPI data? Is SOX data in place? So this way, data quality is also important for that. So this is the relevance of that. Next part is, okay, let's talk about a little bit the security compliance, right? What is the benefit for that, right? It's critical that help you to be informed in the decision about the short or long term of the goals, help you to then determine what kind of return on investment information for your security program and your department you need. One of the biggest questions that I hear a lot about our clients, or back in the day when I was part of the identity access management programs, is that usually directors, CISOs, they don't have the way to demonstrate what is the financial budget they need for the following years, right? How do you demonstrate that you're going to need more staffing? How do you demonstrate that you're going to need more tools? How do you demonstrate that you are understaffing if you don't have metrics to compare against your benchmark or peers within the industry, right? Understand where the total number of identities of your organization are below or above average, and why. So this is why risk reduction, process improvements, and data quality are important, as well as business enablement. So let's review a few of them, right? So primary metrics that we can create as a key performance indicator is, data quality improvements, right? As I said, who has access to the data, how the data flows, who has any type of previous access to alter, modify, or validate the data in any ways. Reduce risk, meaning like apply the concept of the least privilege. In this case, is something super important. And improving processes, right? One of the biggest issues, at least back in the day, that we face with the financial organizations is a lot of the digital transformation implies that you have constant moving of new software, new databases, new servers, new microservices now in the cloud computer base. And that process of what we call hardening is never being validated before even it's implemented. So if you don't have a metrics around, how many groups, how many entities, how many accounts are being built and why, that's something that you cannot improve your process, right? How you can accelerate those time to markets when we're talking about technical implementations. The second set of metrics here, which are business facilitation, as we mentioned before, right? Why these ones are secondary ones? Because probably you want to put something basic and fundamental to help you to support and analyze how the data is flowing. But business facilitation are the duration based, right? You want to know how many people or how many new accounts you're provisioning in a monthly basis and then in a year basis. It is the provisioning process, requests in place. Do we have authorizations in place? What is the time frame for the request to go all the way into the access provisioning process, right? You want to measure that because, again, the whole business facilitation is business enablement, right? You don't want to be in the middle of businesses and productivity within your organization. So you don't know what is the time frame consuming from the moment that somebody requests access to your computing systems and the moment that you provisioning that access and that end user is enabled to use that credentials. That's something that you don't measure, you cannot control, you cannot support with numbers. So again, this is something that is secondary metrics, but are important as you growing into the maturity model of your identity and access management program. Lastly, on the key performance indicator that we actually are touching base today is the compliance part, right? So when we're talking about compliance, and it's not that this is the third one in the less important, some organizations require this one as a more important one. So, but the fundamentals of this one is how you gonna know, how do you wanna considering what kind of KPIs you wanna include around the compliance, right? So there are these three key indicators here that can give you some kind of hint about what is it that you can do and how you're gonna do that, and what is the data that you're gonna use as a baseline to start creating. Number one is regulatory specific, right? When we're talking about financial institutions, healthcare institutions, they are, GLBA, HIPAA, SOX regulated. So probably you're going to start looking into those kind of controls in place and put those KPIs around those controls, right? Deprovisioning, movers, levers, segregation of duties. We're talking about orphan accounts and things that matter. And the second part was something that we found really interesting, beneficial for our clients, is to check your audit reviews, right? Entities that have internal or external audit reviews report can take that as a baseline in order to start looking at, let's create these kind of KPIs that we can use because, our last audit report, IT report, show us these, violations, right? Or then the other part is that, okay, once you have your controls in place, even for identity and access management, the provisioning or deprovisioning controls, you have preventing or detective controls in place, you want to look at the operations of those controls. So by looking at the operation of those controls, you can determine if those control has violation exceptions to the rules, and that's what you can create KPIs around those violations. Things like, hey, do we have all the secondary ID for person who creates privileged access on the accounts? If you have exceptions to that rule, you're going to create a violation, and you're going to create this why we are getting these scenarios, right? And then you want to track and measure those scenarios and make sure that those scenarios don't increase as an exception to the rule, but never gets, over the top, over the average. So this is the three, fundamental matrices that you can create about key performance indicators. And what is the benefit of this, right? So one of the major benefits is that these indicators can enable the organizations for a couple of things, kind of benchmark against the peers, make sure that you understand that the identities in your organization is above or over the average. And as I say before, and I insist on that because a lot of organizations have, trouble with that, is you can use these metrics to determine the increase of the return of investment within your identity and access management organization. Inform the security programs. You can support the decision for what's going to be next in the next year and achieve the maturity model that you want to achieve with the identity and access management process. So a couple of things about identity as a new perimeter. We emphasize that, identity is a new perimeter conceptually because, as we mentioned before, right? A lot of digital transformation, a lot of, obsolescence, a lot of merchant acquisitions are going on right now in our, business environments. So that affecting us, and you probably want to put some kind of controls about, identities that you manage within your organization. So there are three types that we consider very important as part of this, KPI exercise and to consolidate, right? First thing is, looking at your, IGA tool, right? To entity governance tool, right? Looking for roles, users, things that you want to see that, at first glance doesn't look like, right? One of the things that we would like to check back in the day is, okay, the number of employees exceeds the number of roles within the organization, right? That's kind of a red flag. There are very simple metrics that you can implement. So, what is the growth rates in the organization? How many roles are creating monthly? And then you can understand why these roles are being created monthly. Can be because new applications are coming as part of your forest, or new systems are going to come as part of your forest, or new organization was acquired as part of the process, right? And on top of that, there are some key performance indicators that are very simple to implement once you start gathering the data, right? Total numbers of users per business unit. That way you can measure what is the business unit that has used the most and what kind of users do they have? Do they have privileged access? Do they have normal access? Do they have elevated access, right? How many new users are created, right? In a weekly, monthly, or semi-year basis. How many roles in the organization has? How many entitlements? If you have role-based access approach within your organization, look at for what kind of entitlements do you have and how many entitlements you have across your organization. It's something very important to understand. If you have a big amount of entitlements that you need to remove, or actually you need to segregate those, right? Number of applications integrated with the identity governance tools. This is very important, right? You want to achieve that maturity model where all the provisioning, deprovisioning, modification, certification, attestation process, segregation of duties are controlled by your IGA tool. So you want to start putting those applications into your IGA tool. You want to start kind of tracking how many applications are already into that path. How many of those applications are regulatory-based applications, right? That's probably your priority number one, is to understand, okay, out of this set of applications, I have these more SOX compliance applications that I definitely need to achieve and get into the IGA tool as soon as possible. So you want to track that down. And on top of that, what is important about these KPIs, and I really like about SOX control applications onboarding into the IGA tool, is that SOX control can be validate and revise once a year or twice a year, right? So all the SOX applications that are in the perimeter can be validated and reviewed. So by having those controls already in place, those metrics in place, you can actually start consolidating that information, and you can actually gather enough information to facilitate your internal or your external auditor. This is great as part of the SOX metrics that you can get there. One more thing is, or number two is about the identity, right? Identity inventory. So this is where it comes handy to be able to capture it, to collect and discover information about orphan accounts, privileged accounts, excessive accounts. And if you have Active Directory as a platform for authentication access, definitely you want to look at into your groups, right? You want to see how many groups you have there, what kind of groups do they have. All those groups have orphan accounts, Are those groups are privileged groups? Are those groups are stealth? There are groups that empty, groups that hasn't been touched in a while, right? So you want to start considering that inventory as a baseline of your KPIs, and you can start tracking those, right? You wanna see the trend. Okay, how many empty groups do I have, in January compared with, June 2023, compared with December 2023, and you start creating that trend to say like, hey, we probably need to move into, some kind of identity hygiene process to be able to remove all these groups that we're not using and incrementally are getting into our forest with no usability at all, right? So one of the things that we actually recommend here is to check for privileged accounts that, hasn't been signing in the last 45 days, user accounts that, people get provisioning to those accounts and never been used. That's something that you can easily look at it and say like, hi, why this account that was provisioning with this kind of permission, access to this and this application, never get access to it, and never have been used, right? So uncorrelated accounts, pretty much, all orphan accounts, when we're talking about human accounts associated to an owner, the secondary IDs with privileged access associated to an owner, service accounts that could be associated to either an application owner or an application IT owner. Those kind of metrics can help your organization to understand a little bit more where you have those accounts, right? And in terms of privileged accounts, there are a couple of things, if you considering to build or implement, or you have already implemented vaulting solutions, you can actually look at the vaulting solution per se and look for things like, okay, how many accounts do I have vaulted compared with accounts that I don't have vaulted? How many of those accounts have, password rotator in place? How many of those accounts are fully managed? How many of those accounts I haven't rotated the password because X or Y decision. So once you have that information, they're going to give you a very, very good scenarios and a very good data to move to the stage number 3 within these metrics, right? You want to move into the identity hygiene, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to move into the proper maintenance of identity permissions, right? So this is where you start looking at, a more cleanup stuff to do, right? When we're talking about orphan accounts, probably you're going to start correlating those accounts, associated possible owners of those accounts, or making sure that those accounts are not associated to owners that, they're no longer with the company, right? Things like in the previous account aspects, you probably want to check that those previous accounts don't or have the average of permission or previous access through any of the infrastructure assets within your organization, right? If you identify accounts that have previous access, more instances than the average, is a red flag that you probably can consolidate and take that in consideration as part of your identity hygiene. Proper certifications of the accounts, right? Proper certifications of SOX applications. Make sure that all the certification and attestation are performed in a timely fashion, and more sporadically look at password, right? Password expiration policy for those accounts. Just make sure that those accounts are in compliance with password rotation. If they're not, you can report, and then you can create a remediation plan out of those metrics and make sure to execute those metrics in a frequency basis. And then you're going to get 100% of your data. And based on that data, you can create the framework to start your identity hygiene program, or kind of create controls out of your identity and access management program. So lastly, and this is important, right? These concepts can be designed, built, implement, but more important, this is a continual improvement process, right? Just be aware and be informed about this, right? The key factor of this adoption and changes in the organization is to improve the security posture. So as part of the process, and this is a simple way to see it, but definitely trust me, this is valuable for everybody. So once you have the process in place, you need to plan. what needs to be done. You need to check the objectives. You need to design the processes and implementation plans. Then you do. What the do part is very important, is because once you have the processes, the change management plan in place, you execute that. And then you check and validate that the implementation of the plan that you design has evaluations, and the evaluation is in a positive way, meaning like the KPI is actually giving you information, as we saw at the beginning of the presentation, to be actually prepared to make the decisions as part of the organization next steps, right? And four, and more important, is act. So how you want to act onto those results, right? Based on the information you gather in the do and the check phases, the outcome, like root causes and failures of these KPIs, have to be reevaluated, right? We have to probably create a new baselines, kind of highlight new risks and future changes that are required. Remember that what we saw in the first slide, KPIs are no static. You can modify KPIs over time based on the objectives and goals of the organization that you're working for. And remember, organization changes all the time, right? Everything could happen, could be a different aspect of factor that can affect those metrics. So it is important to be able to improve this continuing process for plan, do, check, and adjust as properly.